Brought to you by the Rugby Outlet Mall, equipping you for freedom and connection through rugby. Find out more at rugbyoutletmall.com.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of Grow Rugby. My name is Gift Time Ebelu, and this is the podcast where we talk to people about the opportunities they found, they created, interacted, or just all around wanted to share about via rugby. We have a great guest coming on for you today, coming out of Jesuit High School, one of the coaches for Jesuit High School, actually head coach for Jesuit High School out of Texas, in the Dallas area. My guy, Matt Upton, old New Orleans rugby rival and longtime friend, came on the show. We're just breaking down. This was a fun one. This was another really fun one for me. And I think this was probably one of the more lighthearted ones, while it was also something a bit of a trip down memory lane because when he was playing was right when I started. And I live in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, rival cities. But for a long time, the competition was very uneven in the outcome in New Orleans' favor. So it was good kind of being able to go down that look and that memory and just get those old feels and even just get a little bit more background because his starting time was far further back than mine was. So it was nice kind of seeing things from a different perspective and a different reality and just kind of being able to get some context to some of the actions that had been going on. But that we, had still in a shared behavior. So I really enjoyed this one. And I hope you guys do too. It's we have another wild week. Let you guys know now we're going to I'm going to be heading into Brazil, but we're still going to have the show. We still got episodes to drop, so don't worry. All I will say is the intros might be a little bit different. Might not be as related to the moment, but I think you regardless, you'll still be interested. We got great guests. We got even great guests coming up, man. Like, this has been good stuff so far. Like, I'm genuinely enjoying talking to people. I genuinely enjoy that you guys always come back and take a listen and just give any time to this because it really is something to be able to get the stories of rugby people and what they've been doing and really how they impact the game because I think more and more, and especially over this 2020, we have kind of seen this, I'm not going to say a shift, but it's going to be kind of a revelation. And, there's as much as we want to, we praise rugby for what it has to offer. We also have a chance to be able to reveal its flaws. And as a result of revealing it, we get to be able to work on them and only get stronger. And to know that to some instance it seems to be something that is resonant across the world, I think also helps a lot. I just recently watched this video on BT Sports that featured Maro Itoje and a couple other British rugby players, and they were basically talking about culture issues that they've had growing up and dealing with it. And one of the things that were really interesting about it was when one of the guys, he was like, I don't know if I think that racial issue is as much the issue with rugby as it is a class issue. But a lot of the same things kind of resonate between the two. And Maro Itoje, I believe he said, rugby will continue to get better and it has all the culture pieces that it needs. We just need to be able to take the elite out of rugby. And it's something that you kind of see resonating through the history of this sport. But that's why I say it's in a good way. As much as the history of this sport has been based around a class system, we know this with the advent of rugby league. Poor rugby players who wanted to make money playing this game they loved were restricted from it from the IRB, the original IRB and rugby union, and they said they only wanted amateurism, and so we created a fission in that, a fissure between those two. We saw this is the rise of soccer in South America and a lot of these other major soccer countries, soccer was the sport that the people played, and you still had rugby as a sport that the wealthy elite played. You saw that happen with American football and even Aussie rules football, and actually to more extent cricket in terms of Australians. So whenever you have rugby, rugby didn't get professionalized until 95. And I think that always stands. And so you kind of find out that this sport that has been kind of actively playing against itself to favor its classism issues, finally, breaking away from it only 26 years ago, 25, 26 years ago, is now trying to now set itself up so that it can be much more inclusive, which is what we always preach. And that's what we want to be able to resonate. And these conversations, these moments that we're having now is allowing us to be able to have that full resonating situation, that full impactful situation of being all inclusive and making sure that we are working at a widespread. That's from as much as a racial and cultural issue to a sexual and identity issue, just making sure that these elements get impacted, because clearly this sport has all the elements needed to get to the next level and should be a top 3, top 4 sport in the world with ease. And I'm talking about consistent across nations. But it's working there. So I'm glad we're having these conversations now, because it allows us to be able to truly resonate in the culture, so that we can also be able to just be like, hey, I'm having fun playing rugby, and there's none of the back end, and we know we're getting the best and all that. So as going off of that, I'll be honest, this interview will have nothing to do with what we just talked about, but I felt it was important to say, and I thought it was really good considering everything that's been going on. So, you guys will be able to enjoy this. But in the meantime, guys, go check out Rugby Outlet Mall. We are getting ready to set out a new launch of products in the next month and a half, 2 months. So go ahead and go use the promo code GROWRUGBY, GREAUX Rugby, for 20% off all Rugby Outlet Mall exclusive stuff. That's under Gift Time Rugby Network and under HBCU Rugby Classic. Also, guys, it's not just about gear over at the Rugby Outlet Mall. We are setting up for culture altogether. That is books and movies included, and things to help you be able to go from community to community, so that you can be able to properly traverse through all these rugby concepts and culture versions that you get to have, because it allows us to be able to be better as people, better as players, better as a community. So go check out rugbyoutletmall.com. You guys go see what you can. Check out the movies. Hit it up. It helps us. It helps us be able to do even more. And more importantly, it allows us to set up a future where we can make it viable for other clubs or parties to be able to do the most. And then lastly, please go check out the documentary Singapore to Tokyo Any Way We Can. It's the 7-part, 20-minute episode series where we travel from Singapore to Tokyo, Japan for the 2019 Rugby World Cup. It is an adventure. It'll make you go back and wish that you could travel again despite this COVID situation. It'll get you excited about the Olympics for next year, because the look in Japan is just absolutely amazing, and what they did with the Rugby World Cup is unreal. So guys, check it out. You guys can go to redearthfilms.vhx.tv. That's redearthfilms.vhx.tv. And lastly, please don't forget to put a rating on Apple, iTunes, and let us know what you think. Throw us a message. It gives us an idea of what to be able to work with, gives me an idea of how you guys are resonating with it. I appreciate all the listens that you guys have been providing. And of course, you can check out full video episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/gifttimerugby. So Rugby Network, youtube.com/gifttimerugby network. And you guys can see that and more and everything that we're doing within the Gift Time Rugby and Elements. And of course, Instagram, follow us on Instagram at Grow Rugby Podcast. It's IG page at Grow Rugby Podcast. And you guys can follow, and we'll start being able to let you know who we have coming up and giving the schedule on what is coming down the pipeline. So I'm really excited for this. I'm excited for this new holiday season. I hope you guys are going to continue to stay safe and healthy. But finally, I'll let you guys go. Guys, check this out. Matt Upton of Jesuit High School Rugby out of Dallas, New Orleans Rugby.
Grow rugby, 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 grow rugby.
Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of Grow Rugby. My name is Gift Tommy Bailey, and I got another VIP of people. I know I say it multiple times, but this one is worth the redundancy. He's the person of persons. Old rival of mine, but good friend, Matt Upton of Jesuit Rugby. But really, I go of NOLA Rugby because that's where I legitimately know. This whole Dallas thing is, I'll accept it, even though it's been like almost half a decade. It's been like 3 years, right?
I moved in 2015, so we're almost.
It's been half a decade.
Damn straight.
That's wild.
It's been a while. Remember, we played against each other in 2010. Wrap your brain around that.
That's what I'm saying. It's the solid decade. Solid. You guys, I think you were the second team. No, the first team I ever played against. It was that week. It was actually 09-ish. 09-ish. Whenever it was the first one that we played against each other, and I was literally the first game. And you guys happened to beat us as Baton Rouge.
We were pretty good. We were pretty good back then. But I moved to New Orleans 2 years after the storm. It was almost to the day. I think I moved like August. Yeah, I think I moved August like 10th of 2007. Yeah, so it was almost exactly 2 years. I mean, we were the only house on our street that we were occupying in Lakeview.
Bruh. Like, see, I feel like that was I'm going to blame you for the reason why Gustav hit Baton Rouge. So,
exactly.
Literally in that same.
I was standing on the Gulf Coast just.
Butterfly affecting.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, man, it's been a nice history though. I gotta do say though, I do miss you, man. I miss you out here in Louisiana. I
miss it too. I don't know if my waistline misses it, but I definitely miss being out there. My wife and I love it out there. We can't wait to get back.
Look, as I always tell people, health is overrated. Go ahead and eat yourself.
Exactly. It's not how many years you get. It's how you live those years.
How you live the years.
Exactly.
Well, look, let me start this off like I do with everyone because it's always about the origin story of the superhero. And, look, like, I always like to know, like, how'd you end up getting started with rugby just off the bat?
So I was lucky. So Jesuit, I went to Jesuit here in Dallas, where I coach and teach now. And they had a club. Let's see, I got to Jesuit in 98. And they started the club probably a year before that. And so for 2 years, they were just a club sport. And I think they just had enough people, like we had 20, 25 guys, and they pretty much just kept pestering the athletic director. And they just kept pestering him. So the Reds were hosting a team from Toronto. And they said, okay, well, one of our rules is if we're going to have varsity status, we're going to have to hire a full-time coach. So they hired a coach, and he was my PE coach. So the rule at Jesuit was you didn't have to do PE as long as you were in a sport. So I was doing football, and I was doing wrestling, and then I had about 3 months at the end of the year where I didn't. I had to do PE, and he just happened to be my PE coach. He was like, "You really hate PE, don't you?" I was like, "This is the biggest waste of my time ever."
All this multi-sport
like,
athleticism
yeah.
is just being wasted on.
Yeah, this is, I'm getting sweaty in the middle of the day. This is not what I wanted. So then he just kind of said, "Do you like to carry the ball?" And it's like, yeah, I'm an offensive lineman. I love to carry the ball. And he is like, "Well, you don't have to go to PE and you get to carry the ball if you come out to rugby." And I was like, done. And so I think it was like 2 weeks later I signed up, and then little did I know it would be
The
here.
roller coaster that would go from there.
Yeah.
So wait, so when was this? This was what, 2000, 2001?
This was right in 99, 2000.
99, 2000? That's impressive that considering at that point in time that Jesuit was willing enough to put money into a youth rugby program. And that's, as we know, like rugby's only starting to, especially in the States, is only starting to like get its blossom. And let's even be honest, from a global standpoint, that post-95 era is whenever it's really started to even open up. So you're talking about 4 or 5 years in, is just getting its movement.
Oh yeah, I still had to, I had to wake up at 4 a.m. and, in between cricket games, there'd be rugby on Fox Soccer Channel. On the old box, just
on the old box. Got to get the right satellite channels.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. It was nuts. But yeah, no, it was. It was. So that was because then it wasn't too long after that was the USA played South Africa in Houston, and so that was really our first kind of look at what it was like outside of our little bubble.
That was 2002, 2003.
Before that, so it would have been probably either 2000, 2001, or 2001, 2002. Probably in those summers, but it was, that was unreal to see it. Cause even at that time, it's nothing like it is now. There wasn't ESPN Plus. There wasn't, there was like Super League.
ESPN didn't even really care.
No, they didn't care about anybody's rugby.
Right.
And it was, so, we got the World Cup like on tape delay. It was a totally different world, but it was great to see, the South Africans traveled, they traveled really well,
right,
to come just to Houston, Texas.
Man. And like even for that, as a kid, and especially coming off the fact that you had, everybody knows it's Texas, so football is life out there, and you're in Dallas, so that's even just skyrocketed. You're still in the golden eras of the Cowboys, and people actually thinking they're good. And
I coach with a Dallas Cowboy that won 2 Super Bowls, and I still give him a good hoot at all the time. Yeah, he brought his Super Bowl rings once, and I was like, "Where'd you get those out of a Cracker Jack box? How many box tops did you have to collect for that?" Unbelievable.
Just like, oh, you guys did things before? I can't even remember. It's so far the senility is kicking in for me.
You can't figure out free agency, but when everybody has to stick around, you can form a pretty good team.
Man, so like even in that element, like even for your parents, like what did it mean for your parents to be able to have you playing rugby on top of what you were already doing for football?
They didn't really care. They, because I'd started wrestling, so they were used to me doing a sport that they had never seen before, and to them, they were just kind of, they were like, okay, yeah, whatever, like, just don't get hurt. Because, football, at that time, we were still thinking maybe scholarships and things like that, and I was still getting recruited for football. So it was kind of like, or in wrestling. So they were kind of like, just don't get hurt, you're having fun. Because it's different than what it is today. I would have never specialized in the sport. I don't think my parents would have let me. Like when football was over, football was over. Do your off-season workouts, stuff like that. But so then I think within my first year, I reserved for the Texas select side, and then my second year, I think that's when the USA game was, and we played Texas selects versus Oklahoma selects as the curtain raiser.
Yeah,
and then and then I really started traveling, and that's when they started realizing, oh, wait a second, like this
could really do something with this.
Yeah, the thing they didn't like about it was that if I was going to do anything with it, all roads pointed to leaving home. So they were like, okay, wait a second. So they, you're not going to go somewhere where I have to see you.
Are we going to have to go out of our way to come get you?
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. It was, mom's got a radius, and that's the radius you're allowed to be in.
Oh, No, that's real. Like, and I can, because literally you were already trying. It's not even just like a pathway pointed. Literally, you were already making your way away from home, like in just do these travel select sides and whatnot.
Yeah, doing travel select sides, and then USA U19 happened, and so it was, that was traveling again, and then seeing the players that I was playing with, especially when we got to like USA Select, and when we did, when they used to do the ITTs, we got second place, and playing against those California kids, and I mean, they were just like, whoa, like there's, there's real people out there that play this game, because they, Texas, it was still, I would argue to say at that point in time, high school rugby in Texas, even though it was in its infancy, was bigger than the men's league. Yeah, I mean, like the Reds were there. The Quins were in MLR, or not MLR.
Not
Super
League. The Super League, whatever.
Yeah, the Quins were in Super League, so they were bringing over a bunch of South Africans that didn't really stick around, and we didn't live in that neighborhood, so we never got to see them. Austin area high school was a good team, and they fed into what is now the Austin Blacks. Nobody had really heard of the Huns. The Blacks hadn't done anything yet. Houston hadn't really done anything. And I think even going back, I mean, like really over the last, that was the kind of the last time when I think this part of the country, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, where we had rugby, we just weren't really out in the open. And then we just in the last 10, 20 years, it's been a totally different thing.
Well, I was going to say, it seems to be that's always been the mantra. Like, it's, you don't know there's rugby until you enter rugby. Then once you enter it, you're like, I don't know how I ever missed it.
Oh, yeah. I tell my kids when they're making their college decisions, they're like, okay, well, I want to go to school with rugby. And I said, okay, it's going to be easier for you to find schools that don't have rugby. Like, there are less schools that don't have rugby than schools that do. Like, they're like, how many programs do you go? I go, well, let's see, there's 350 Division I basketball. So I'm going to say at least that many. Like they're everywhere. I go, it's just a level. It's just, you have to decide what level of commitment you want, to play. Do you want it to be more of a club for fun, to stay in shape and make friends and travel? Or do you want to, get competitive?
So, like, for you, then what was the motivation that kept you going? Because obviously, as you mentioned, you went from being able to play, starting to play with the high school side, getting to the select side, playing for the USA U19, and now being able to go to these specific, again, select tournaments that had you competing against these states. But for you, obviously, again, you said you were already working on scholarships for football. What transferred over for you?
I ended up picking a school. It was the only school that I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do. So it was the only school that offered me both football and wrestling and kind of gave me free reign to do both. And I'll name the school in a second because they didn't have rugby at the time, and they do now. They didn't even have a fraternity on campus at the time. So they offered me on the spot, I think Army was going to come watch me for football, and if they would have offered me, I would have gone to play football there. And probably would have played rugby. A good friend of mine from Houston played rugby there.
Nice.
So
good rugby up there too. Good rugby at West Point.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think he only got deployed like once, if that, and he didn't do anything because he was in the like the high caliber athletic thing for a while. But they so I would have gone there. And then none of the a few schools offered me walk-ons, and I didn't want to walk on. So I picked the one school that offered me both. And I did both and hated the school. And I was traveling back and forth from Oklahoma. So I was going I was at Lindenwood. So that was the school. Didn't have rugby at the time. Now
how the tables have turned.
Now I remember sitting in my dorm being like, we could play rugby here. And lo and behold, now they've become this team.
They did it out of spite for you, Upton. They did it out of spite for you.
It was like right after I moved to New Orleans, and they kind of brought over a bunch of Kiwis. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
But you know what? For what it's worth, I can take away the rugby because I do like Josh Macy and oh my goodness, why am I forgetting names? But my guys over there at Lindenwood, they do great, and Lindenwood as a rugby school is amazing. But man, as a town and being in a place, man, that is the middle of nowhere.
St. Charles, Missouri.
Right. I think one of my favorite memories of going up there was to go broadcast one of the games, and this was in the spring, and it freaking snowed like in the middle. I'm like, yo, what is happening right now? Like,
you were probably there after this. I lived in the dorm. So the first dorm that was built with an elevator was built right before I got there. I lived in the first men's dorm and it used to be a women's dorm because it used to be a women's only school. And then it was for Native. It was women's only, and then it was Native Americans only. And
I lived. Billy Nicholas is who I was thinking of too. I don't know. I forgot Billy.
Yeah, and my dorm at the time when it was first built did not have central air or central heating.
Bruh.
So, and I lived in the basement, and the basement was meant to heat the entire building. So, at one day there was 6 inches of snow. My heater's on. We are sweating. I have a window open, blowing in air. From outside. There's 6 inches of snow on the ground, and I'm sweating in my room. And while people are freezing up in the top because they just hadn't. It was a wonderful experience.
I'm starting to see. There might have been some evidence as to why you hated going to this school.
Yeah, it was a wonderful. I mean, it was weird. It was like I was never an academic superstar, but I walked in there and some of those academics, I was like, "This is a joke. I'm getting out of here." And so, for undisclosed reasons, confidential reasons, I was going back and forth to Oklahoma every weekend to OU. So my
so what was
last
her name?
class. My wife says. My wife has a certain name that she calls anybody I used to date. So I used to get in the car. So Friday, my last class was at 2:30. I used to get in the car at 3:30, and I'd be like, "All right, I'm gone." So that's 8 hours to Norman. And so then what happened was I showed up for unknowingly, or I know I did. I started talking to them because I knew I kind of wanted to transfer. Mom had talked about going to OU anyway from the beginning, and I'd been talking to them, and so I showed up one weekend. It happened to be Bedlam, so it was OU versus Oklahoma State at Norman, and I just saw the people on the berm and the crowd, and then we all went to the clubhouse afterwards, and I was just like, "Yep, this is the one." And so I transferred in, I think the next semester.
I mean, that's fair. And to a good program, and created this obsession with this overrated school. But
I mean, we're the winningest program since World War II. I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, yeah, winningest programs, yes. Championship
I
program,
get it. I get it. You have a recent one. I remember our third national championship too. It would just happen to be in 1956.
I see you.
Yeah. And you got
You know what? This was before we were fully getting everybody in. So this 1956. Do we really even count anything before 1965? Like, I
mean, like, what do you have? You have 6. You have what? Your second Heisman?
Look, again, whenever you decide not to have to worry about playing defense, it's very easy for your quarterbacks to get these.
As LSU found out this year. What do you need? Look, LSU stopped caring about defense. What happened? They won the national championship. You're welcome.
Well, I just want to be remembered for all those times, the last 2 Heisman Trophy winners from OU, how they did against LSU and those SEC.
Sorry,
Jason White.
I can't hear you over these $25 million contracts. It's just, let's wait and see what Joe Burrow does. He seems like a real class character.
Hey, look, man. At least he'll probably be on the field longer than Sam Bradford could be at any one.
Sam Bradford cashed a $65 million check. He can do whatever he wants. That's. I mean,
I will give you that.
Poor guy.
I'll give you that. He is the second greatest scam artist for NFL. Only behind Matt Flynn to be able to do it through multiple teams on layered checks.
Yeah, Matt Flynn has cheeky Super Bowls. Like, do you know how many Super Bowls he has? He could have 5. We have no idea. I know he has 1 because he backed up the Packers for their one. But still, he could have another 4. I don't know.
The point is, hey, look, it all works out. But
yes.
I'd be talking football on this rugby podcast, but this is what we do, all right? This is what
I'll get you back right. So do you remember this? So you might remember this. So then back then, the difference between rugby, I don't know what rugby's like now in college. Back then, we traveled every weekend, and I loved it. So like we would go to Albuquerque High Desert Tournament. Little Rock had their old tournament that was there. Right. And then what that led to is we'd go to Ruggerfest every year. So then what I used to do when I was at OU, excuse me, is within like the summertime. So we would take finals. We would hang out for a week in Norman, which if you can imagine, small town when school lets out. And we would kind of, I guess, I don't know if we'd realize it sucked. And then we would hop in the car and drive to Aspen, and we would play for the Gentlemen of Aspen throughout the summer in the little league they have for the Valley.
Yeah.
And then drive back to OU, and, fall practice started probably like 2 weeks later.
I mean, look, look, for what it's worth, one, great bonding experience, and two, I mean, you're in Colorado. Like, what can you say against that? And just be able to just fully enjoy it. And then Aspen was like a really good team at that point too, like a solid D2
yeah.
At that point.
They were D2, and those guys that I played with. So that was 05 through 07. Those guys that were there with me in 07, that summer, they ended up staying in Aspen, and I think they won the D1 national championship in 08 or 09, and they won 2 sevens national championships. And so it was then they kind of all moved back to like Tulsa and stuff, and they
and then like they all left. They're like, we're done with the mountain there.
And that used to be like one of them was he was making a ton of money, but he was literally just parking cars for a hotel.
Yeah.
But it was they.
Hey, money counts. All that matters.
I'm telling you. They could afford to go where they need to go. But that was always kind of Aspen's mantra for a long time. Like when they were in the old Super League, that's, all these guys would fly in from Fiji and New Zealand. They'd play in our season and then go home and play in their season at home. Yeah. So that was kind of their thing.
So, I mean, and then again, it's one of those situations where do you consider that as a situation that might have even hurt it a little bit, but also because you guys got to interact, so you guys also get this like added bonus without any of the pressure of having to like perform?
I think it hurt it, but they kind of built around it. So they understood at the very beginning that the Super League season was not the season. So what they did, kind of what New Orleans is doing, I guess, kind of right now with their MLR team, is that they understood that the Super League was a totally different beast. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason that they kept that summer league in the Valley, where like Aspen plays Vail and Steamboat Springs and stuff like that. The reason they kept that league and they kept it as a 15s league that happens outside of sevens was because that was their traditional league. Right. So that's when like the hometown guys, would come in. But I mean, they led to, Alec, I think it was Alec Parker. Like he second rowed for like 40 or 50 caps, and he's born and raised in Aspen. And so a lot of those guys, but you say that, did it hurt it? Yes and no. There's the pitch is in the middle of the field. The pitch is in the middle. The pitch is in the middle of town. It's the center of the town out there, and that's because of those guys. But but yeah, I think that's why maybe that's part of the reason why they're D2 right now. Yeah. And it's easier money wise. You need a backer, and especially to be in Colorado, you need a backer to kind of play in that league where you're going to California.
Expensive area like that.
Oh yeah, but we never had to travel that much when we were there. Nowhere near. I think one year we did the math. I think it was 2011 when we won the D2 championship in New Orleans, and it was we had traveled like 5,700 miles. We were the most traveled team in the world outside of teams that had to leave different countries to play in their league. So outside of like South Africa, yeah, it was nuts.
Wild. But it makes sense. Again, like I feel like that's a plight of being in the southeast, southwest per se. Is just because while there's a lot of teams, there's a good number of teams, but everybody is so sparsed out. I was laughing at my Northeast friends because I'm like, you'll go up there and everything is a 4-hour radius, and everybody's talking about a 30-minute drive is a long drive, and I'm like, are you out of your mind? I was like, this is a blink. What?
When we first moved up to D1, our closest drive was 6 hours. That was our closest away game.
That was whenever up in Atlanta?
Yeah, Old White and what's the other team?
Renegades.
Renegades. They were still D1 at the time. So, but yeah, it was just, especially in the South, we're so spread out. There's a lot of rugby. We're so spread out that we kind of all have to stick together and just kind of work that way. And I think that is one of the ways that, MLR kind of helped was just because now, New Orleans and Baton Rouge can still play,
Right.
as opposed to, at that time, if we wanted a close game, if we wanted to go to D1, we had to try to find a way to bring, Jackson and Baton Rouge with us or it wasn't going to happen. And there just wasn't, if they didn't have the rosters or if they didn't have the guys, they're like, no, we're good.
So I want to go into this, the club rugby life here. So First off, what brought you from Oklahoma? What ended up taking you from Oklahoma and then disappointing your parents to make you go all the way to New Orleans and skipping over Dallas completely? Why did you bring such sadness to your mother?
New Orleans was in the radius. New Orleans is in the radius.
Real? What?
Yeah, so it was 8 hours.
Radius.
It was 8 hours. She needed to be able to make the drive in one drive. So
okay.
And then so what happened is my sophomore year in college, my mother moved to Miami for her job, and so that kind of broke down everything.
I was about to say she got to move the radius on that one a bit too.
Yeah, because she didn't want me to go. She did talk about me transferring to University of Miami, and it's like no. But then they moved back to Austin because my sister lives in Austin. And then that kind of opened up the race again. So then I had told her kind of at the time, she's like, so what are you thinking? I was like, okay, I'm going to go to, I'm either going to go back to Colorado with all my buddies and go play in Aspen or play with Glendale.
Right.
And or I'm going to try to go overseas. I had some friends that had played for the London Scottish at the time. Or I'm going to, just find somewhere else. And then Katrina happened, and my dad's from New Orleans. So when Katrina happened, that kind of sealed the deal for me. And I had been going back and forth to New Orleans. We played LSU in New Orleans a couple times, and and then I had friends there. So once I started going there, I just kind of kept going. And I mean, so for me, it was just kind of like, okay, once Katrina happened, I saw kind of how much it affected everybody, and then it literally was just a couple emails. And a buddy of mine that I ended up living with, he said the house will be ready August 10th, and I was like, okay, I'll be there on the 12th, and just packed it up, and I was there. I mean, my dad was, ecstatic. Yeah. So
yeah, he still had family that was still there to check in on you and whatever, but you still were.
Oh yeah, he had an excuse to go get a po' boy or get some shrimp. He was ecstatic. He was really happy. I mean, if I still lived there, he always told me, he's like, if something happens to your mother, I'm moving in with you.
Oh, this is like, okay, yeah, well.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that I was trying to be my own man, but all right, I know that.
That's what, and I did the standard thing. So, I don't know how many of your listeners are in New Orleans area. So there is a lumber yard in New Orleans that pretty much takes in any new rugby player for the first 6 months. And
yeah.
That was the key, to kind of get anybody in club rugby. If you wanted a college kid, it was, hey, I've got a job that will allow you to play rugby and get you some beer drinking money. And that's essentially all that they wanted. It's like, it's not your career. It's just going to do. It's going to move. Yeah. Something to get you going. Yeah. But we were still holding on to pipe dreams that we were going to play. We didn't care about our career. Nowadays, I feel like kids are so, hell bent on, growing up so fast. But back then, it was just like, it was essentially like taking gap years. It was like, whatever. I'll sleep on the couch. I don't care.
Right.
So yeah, I had that job set up. The house was set up, and I was like, done. I'll be there.
Nice. So going into that experience, so you're inside New Orleans. You have this. It's still a complete clusterfuck at that point. Like, let's call it what it is. Like I remember 2007. So I think I was just getting back. I didn't get back from Florida until 2008, 2009. But it was getting to be able to have that, being able to see everything whenever you'd come home and visit. And of course, Florida just seemingly having to been bypassed by every hurricane that wanted to go over towards Louisiana. So you get there, and what's the health? Because I've talked to guys like Shay, who talked about how much they had to do during New Orleans, during the Katrina, and coming into that. So what was like the mindset that was going on for the New Orleans team at that time? Because from what I understood, that New Orleans team wasn't the same one that you guys ended up getting into in 09, 2010. That was one that was a little bit more struggling, at least according to the Baton Rouge guys, where it was a little bit more of a competition between the two sides.
Yeah, it was. You could say there was a mix. I mean, there was a lot of the kind of, I guess, what we'd call them old boys now, guys that had been playing since maybe the earlier 2000s, and that probably in a normal situation would have moved on to old boys, and they were kind of forced to be in starting positions and kind of be, kind of be in larger roles. The terrible part of it was, so you can imagine, no traffic anywhere you went. There was nothing. There were only maybe 100,000 people in the city at the time, probably less in the city and all the surrounding suburbs. And when you cross that bridge to get, from the West Bank over to the east side, it was, you would regularly see Hummers. The National Guard was still there. The light posts were down; they were on the ground, so we would change on the light posts. Nobody had gone into the changing rooms because we were just scared of what was going to be.
Who's going to be in there, and then what did they leave behind?
Yeah, so we had a couple of lights that were still up, so you had to move practice as it got later in the year. You had to move practice kind of closer to different lights, which just happened to be closer, like that little swamp that's there that just has mosquitoes the size of your fist, and it was kind of patchy at times, I would say. I don't think we went into a lot of games with a 23-man roster.
Yeah.
But everybody had work. Everybody that was back had work. But the city wasn't. I mean, like I said, we could walk out in our front yard, and this was before FEMA trailers even got there. So we could walk out in our front yard and look left and look right. We were about a mile from where the levee broke, and we could look left and look right, and it was our house. There was one house that looked weird, 6 houses down to the right, and that was it. The only lights in the entire. We went to parlays once. Rest in peace, parlays. Hashtag rebuild parlays. If we went to parlays once, and there's a certain player who's very small and has a small man syndrome, and he may or may not have had too much to drink at a certain time, and there were 10 people in parlays. Parlays was not whatever parlays turned into when I left, and it was college kids. It was, you had to be 60 and you had to smoke 3 packs of cigarettes without thinking twice about asking for a glass of water. So I had special parlay clothes because it would smell so bad. So he decided to come outside, and he really had to go to the bathroom. And so he decided to pee on a car. And it may or may not have been. Anyway, we didn't have police. We didn't have police. So the entire National Guard came to almost arrest him.
Are you
serious?
There's
Hummers, guys in camouflage, guns, real guns. It was nuts. And I was like, can I just walk home right now?
let me. I'm just gonna walk away. I'm just gonna go this way. You guys.
The entire United States military is telling this kid he's too drunk. Well, no crap. I don't. It was nuts. Yeah. So that was New Orleans. I mean, it was awesome. At the same time, it was weird. I mean, that was the first year I think Mardi Gras came back and everything.
Right. It was like that wild intensity. Wild intensity.
No streetcars.
Bro.
They were still buried. It was nice.
Driving without traffic. I don't have to wait for stupid things to keep getting in my way, or where they're gonna hit me from behind.
You could get from the airport to our field in 10 minutes because no one's gonna catch you for speeding, and you could just go 100 miles an hour down I-10.
Yo, for those who don't know, Gretna, where New Orleans' actual field is what's called the West Bank in Gretna, and then you have. And the airport's not even in New Orleans; it's in Metairie, and we got to make sure we distinguish that properly. All right, but that is legitimately, and I've had to time it because I've been late to many games. At least a 35-minute drive, a 25 to 30-minute drive to just get all the way over. And this was at the time whenever the stupid toll was there too, so that always slowed me down.
It makes a New Orleans sandwich. New Orleans is in the middle. But I mean, even when I left, So then even when I left in 14 or 15, like it's
Yeah.
there's still houses boarded up. Like, so this was before they forced everybody to board up the windows. So obviously working in a lumberyard was great because everybody needed wood. So it was awesome. Yeah. I had tons of work. I didn't have to worry about anything.
No, I always say this, like one of the big things that I feel like is going to always be the hindrance for the growth here in the U.S. is the fact that there is not a position of financial gain that can be had for new players. It's not even to say like, oh, we got to pay them big money like that. It's just like, yo, they just need something to be able to show a value support that they can lean on and then just build up from there. And it used to be obviously from small businesses, from other rugby people, but I don't know if it's as that. I feel like in this day and age, there's just such a disparity when it comes to how small businesses are done that it doesn't always work in that same, it can't work in that same way like it did in the smaller era, the younger eras of rugby, quote, quote.
Well, I think it's a twofold part. I think like if I'm gonna throw out a weird idea for Americans here. Okay. The fact that we have to have national champions, right? We're the only country in the world where there are 8 divisions of some sport and everybody has their own national championship, right? So why would I want to move up? So that's kind of how I think it kind of works. And it's the same thing I'm kind of trying to do here, I think, in Texas, is that, if everybody just takes care of their area. So imagine like the New Orleans rugby scene right now. There's like 5 teams, in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, kind of Southeast Louisiana, Mississippi area. Like there's like 5 teams out. That's more teams than we probably ever had.
Right.
And if they all kind of filter into a team that does play in USA Division II, which therefore then filters into a team that then plays in the MLR. So it's kind of like if we're all kind of taking care of each other and growing the game and getting better players to go to the higher levels. And then if you find a way to financially support the higher teams, it kind of asks players to take it on themselves to move up to the next level, or a team. So like with what I think like in high school rugby, jamborees don't exist here in Texas. So, but like if we could play like almost tournament style, and it's like, okay, if you get called up to D1, you get to host the tournament next year, one of the tournaments, and you get to keep all the revenue.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
And
so
that now incentivizes people to actually work because we're great. But here's the kicker. I think the issue then goes back to people. Again, the core issue is, and what we kind of talked about from the beginning, people marketing out that rugby event outside of just the range of it. Now, I know with Jesuit, obviously there's a pretty strong alumni base, so it's probably a little bit easier. But I would say even for like a Baton Rouge, I still go to I haven't gone in a while, but the last time I went to a Baton Rouge club game, it's basically the same people that you're going to see almost every single time. It's going to be players, then the player's girlfriend, then one of the player's girlfriend's friend, and then kids, wives, and then that's basically it. And it might make up, about 20 people at best, 20, 30 people. And but the issue would be like nobody is talking about the game outside of this small range arena. So I can also see that people should see this as an incentive, but then go like, well, the excuse is everything that I kind of just put. We're not going to be able to get the people, so what's the purpose for us to try and do it? But I think that becomes the issue. Like, you've got to be able to present that.
Well, I think what we've moved to here in Texas, which has been kind of interesting, and the club scene hasn't done it, so I don't know if that's going to work. But, like, think about it. In that 10-year span, I did this math the other day, so this is going to blow your mind. When people talk about where's the hotbed of rugby, okay? And so for the longest time, people would say it's California, it's, New York, it's Colorado. Okay. Yeah. Now, watch this. Okay, you ready for this? 2008, I believe Tampa Crew makes the Sweet 16 for the first time.
Right.
Or that would have been probably 2009-ish.
2009, because that was the year that was right before the year that you guys played against them. Right.
2010, they win the Division II National Championship. In 2011, it is New Orleans versus Tampa Crew. So Division USA South teams are playing in the national championship for Division II.
Right.
We win it. We go up to D1. We make the Sweet 16, and I think a South team still goes to the D2 Final
It
Four.
was Life, right? Life and
Oh yeah. So then, and the year in 2011 when we win it, Life wins D1.
yeah,
So then, Life's going to the Final Four every year. So you can just go ahead and say one team from the South is going to the Final Four every year. So then, within the next couple of years, we go to the Sweet 16, but we win the D3 national championship. Then we go to D1 Final Four and get third. Life wins it that year. The next year, we play Life for the national championship.
yep,
So, and it's kind of like, so you're seeing, and then in the next couple of years, the Dallas Reds go to 2 Final Fours, and then the Austin Blacks, the next 3 years or 4 years, go to 4 national championship games.
right.
And have played the Reds or some team from the South in the Final Four all those years. So it's kind of like, okay, so maybe there's something to this. Like maybe we've got some athletes down
We got
here.
something here. But
Yeah.
To be honest with you, and to be honest with you, I actually had noticed that too, because I remember even writing an article, I think back in 2015, that was essentially, rugby is ruled by the South because of those exact stats. And that was even to the effect of even the college one, and albeit it was because of Life University primarily, but it was still there was a team from the South in each championship, and then even for sevens, there was a team from the South that was at least in the final 8 or at least the Final Four, in the Elite 8 or the Final Four. But what was always confusing to me was what was the factor that wasn't able to take it over the top in terms of recognition. And obviously I think there was a lot of bias just because of separation. Just the South is so far from everybody else. So, and whenever the main hubs were Colorado, New York, and then, upper Los Angeles, lower San Francisco, that little middle ground over there. So, of course, the South doesn't get its due credit because Life can't be the South. It's all foreign guys and whatnot. So throw that out the water. And then, people would say the same thing for the Reds and the Blacks. And even whenever it came to you guys, I think, were the ones that no one expected. And same with Tampa Crew. And then, of course, Tampa Crew kind of fell off right after that 2011. You guys somehow beat them into literal submission.
There were a couple of teams that we had. And that whole time, the USA South is playing in the
NACRA.
in NACRA, and they won it, and they were only the second United States team to win an IRB trophy in any IRB tournament.
And didn't get really that much recognition out of that.
Hell no.
Right.
Hell no.
So for you, considering that, I've noticed, I didn't pass on the study flex that you put there, but the fact that you've been in these championship moments, whether from NACRA to, like I said, I see your flex. Getting that NACRA championship to getting the New Orleans one, what was this constant resonance that you kept seeing and dealing with that you guys kept growing? Because again, New Orleans, I remember, not that you guys were garbage, but it was just you were Baton Rouge D2, we were the same page, and then you guys just started escalating ridiculously, and it kind of even pushed over into NACRA.
Well, it was with NACRA, I think with NACRA it was a little bit different just because we had already kind of been there. But before we got there, I think what happened is we had kind of a mentality change. We knew that, we're all guys that are just working. Outside of me, I was the closest thing to a scholarship athlete there. I was just doing part-time jobs or whatever.
Right.
If a job said you have to work Tuesday nights, I was like, oh, sorry, that's not happening. But we had, engineers, lawyers, doctors, just like every other club in the country. And I think just kind of what ended up happening is as a group, everybody kind of had their mindset on, I'm going to say, I can't remember the exact year. Maybe it's the 2009 class from LSU.
Yeah.
And for those guys that don't know, kids from New Orleans don't go far.
Yeah.
They go to LSU.
Yeah.
They summer vacation in Baton Rouge for 4 years, and then they come right back home. And it's the oddest thing in the world, but every one of them does it. So we kind of knew these guys were going to come back.
Right.
And so we knew you get some Bobby Johns and some of those guys, and it was kind of okay, we're gonna actually give this a shot. We're gonna put this together. And it took the older guys, guys my age and a few guys older than me, to kind of sit there and say, one, we're going to play anybody anywhere. So we started hosting the Australian teams that came.
Right.
We hosted Uick. And then we just kind of said, okay, like we're going to work out a lot. And we're going to treat it like we're not getting paid to play, but we're going to,
treat
we're
it
going
like
to find
a
a way.
professional setting.
Yeah, treat it like our sport. And a lot of it was because some of us were getting recognition. So it was kind of like, guys were making Atlanta sevens. We had good size in our forward pack. And then we had some guys, like we had some really key guys from Mississippi that would drive into New Orleans to come to practice and play. And we had some guys that just – because New Orleans is such an engineering hub that there were just a lot of engineers that would come in and they turned out to be pretty good at rugby. Mm-hmm. And so we just kind of ran with it with about 40, 50, and then we got up to 60 guys. And it was, we had local boys. We had guys, we had guys that just happened to be in New Orleans. I was about the closest thing to a guy that came in. And then, there'd be a few guys that wanted to come to New Orleans to live the life, or they wanted to come to New Orleans to
– They saw a Mardi Gras show, and they were like, I want to go do that.
Yeah, or they'd, intern with an engineering firm. I mean, most of it was engineering. And then some guys would they'd work for a law firm or something. For some reason, rugby players and lawyers go hand in hand. And we were big. I looked at a picture of that team, and I'm about 6 foot, 6'1", 6'3" in your program. And I'm probably one of the shortest forwards.
Yeah.
We had guys that were, we had a Division I, he played O-line for Ole Miss. He was in our 2-row. And we had a guy who probably could have played at a super high level, but he was, he was a professional. He had a job. He didn't care. But it was, So then going from that, then we just kept it running. Once you get that train running, it's going. And luckily MLR came at the right time, or I think it might have fallen off.
I think New Orleans faded a little because I think there was there became a drop off from those 09 LSU kids, and they started going into their professional lives and getting married. And then the kids that came that would be the 2011, 2012 offshoots, I think this is where the shake kind of started to come in.
And
the professional run started popping up with pro rugby first, and then subsequently.
And probably the most exciting try from that national championship game, was scored by a kid who played at ULL.
Right.
He was a running back who was too small at Rummel, and he played rugby at ULL, and he just loved it. And and then we were starting to get recognition, and then USA South, them saying that they wanted to do NACRA was huge for us. It made us feel like, someone's going to come look at us. Because back then, to get looked at, if you wanted any shot of national team or anything like that, you had to make the Sweet 16 or go further. No coach was coming to watch New Orleans play Baton Rouge. They were coming to watch USA Sweet 16, and you had to get to that level. And so doing that was big. Some of us had kids, but a lot of us didn't. A lot of us weren't married. We enjoyed beer a lot.
Quite a bit. I feel like that was going to end up happening regardless of rugby or not.
Yeah.
But the compilement of the New Orleans and rugbyness kind of added.
Yeah. We enjoy, and it was a community of it. And then that big group, that 2011 group, and the 2012 D3 team, when those guys step away, that was the most interesting thing, because when all of us kind of stepped back from rugby, it was interesting to see how rugby changed in New Orleans. We had just NORFC, which still exists, but even before MLR started, then you enter the Rob Markel Cup, and so now we've got our own league with our own rules that we don't need USA Rugby for.
Or anything like that.
Now, as long as we can find refs, we can play, Baton Rouge versus Crew, and Crew versus Po' Boys, and Po' Boys versus, so when that happened, that's when you knew New Orleans rugby was set. There's probably more rugby players now. At one point in time, 2011, 2012, we were the largest club in the country. I think we had 125 SIPs members. And I bet you there's more rugby players in New Orleans now than there ever was.
I believe it just because there's just so much more variation in the way. But it is still, like I said, it's interesting where it's gone. And now to the effect of what's happened with MLR, I think it's always really interesting being able to watch something from the beginning to the end, beginning to the present. And so I always, in my mind, MLR is just the offshoot of what you guys were doing in 2011, 2012. Obviously, as to obviously new players coming in, but I'm talking about the core group of people is basically off that offshoot, that concept, that those people that were involved in that. So even for you, like, well, let me put it like this. Whenever it was created, and I was like, oh, these are guys I know, and you're getting to see a little bit more behind the scenes of it, as opposed to, like, I think a lot of people have this, obviously, look at it from a fan view or look at it from an uncertain look, a scouter's view, whatever, from the outside in. And I'm like looking at it from the inside out a little bit more, and it's like, okay, like I get this. Like, I get this a lot more. And no, don't get me wrong. I was suspicious of MLR after the pro rugby stuff. But there was.
Well, I think financially what happened is MLR's kind of got it right. And the one thing is, like, it's up to everything else that had been started, rugby and soccer, you could really throw into that, had been, if the league succeeds, you succeed.
Right.
And now it's like, we're going to put it on you guys. So we're kind of skipping. I would say if you had to guess where we are in the MLR circuit, we're kind of to put it in NFL terms, we haven't gotten the first Super Bowl yet. We're still kind of figuring it out. Guys are still, quote unquote, working side jobs. They're not getting paid a ton of money.
Right.
They're just
football
kind
in
of
the
still
70s,
doing.
basically.
Yeah. And so we're pretty far back, but that was when MLR started. That was one of the big things. You had to have a tie into a club, essentially, because you had to fill your roster.
Right.
So that's kind of why New Orleans got into it, because that was a big thing with the guys. Like, so Tim Falcon's the owner. That was a big thing with his group of New Orleans guys, was that he said, we've always had really good rugby players in New Orleans. We've always had, guys that have made Eagles. We've had guys that have been All-Americans, but we just kind of get overlooked because we're in the South and, they don't travel to come see us, and we don't necessarily want to travel to go to the things that they go to. So, he said when MLR, he pretty much just said, New Orleans is not getting forgotten, and it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Had MLR started before I got to New Orleans, before Katrina, I don't think New Orleans has a team. I just don't think they're going to say there's not enough rugby there. And now, because of what we had been through, and, we had old boys from the 70s and 80s and 90s that just sat there and said, look, what do you need? If we've got a kid that can't make ends meet, we'll make sure he gets, he keeps a roof over his head.
I think that's one thing that I think you guys have probably held stronger than any other program here in Louisiana, especially, was the depth of the alumni network. It was one thing that was about Baton Rouge that always bothered me, was that there was not there was a history to it. Like, obviously we know there's a history to it, but it wasn't very well known. It wasn't an interactive history. It was kind of just like, every once in a while, stories here and here, and a sparse person might pop in and out, but it was never a cohesive measure where it was like, oh, this is who we're following behind. Oh, this is who we're seeing. It was just, oh, crazy story. I don't know where any of these guys are, but okay, crazy story.
Yeah, you only see them at, like, the banquet at the end of the year.
No, not even that. Not even that.
It's a problem ever. I think, before the Black success, the Reds had the largest team in the country with like 115 SIPT members.
Yeah.
But their alumni donations are like nothing. And it's hard to do because some people say you should just do it because of what the club gave you. And it's like, well, I understand that, but what is the club giving me now? Like,
now, right.
Yeah, can my kids come hang out? And I think that's what New Orleans and Baton Rouge really had going for them, is that, when you went to show up for rugby, you went to the one field. That's where you went to watch rugby, and somebody had a pot going with gumbo, and somebody, had dirty rice going, and somebody, beers were going to be going everywhere, and you'd make a day of it.
Inviting.
It was very inviting.
I'll give them for both of it. Yeah.
So, and I think that was just kind of a thing. Atlanta used to kind of be the same way. I think it was just kind of a South thing even.
Yeah.
Whereas, everyone's a little bit more tight-lipped outside of Louisiana.
This is true.
To-go cups haven't been a thing.
Say what?
To-go cups just became a thing in Dallas because of COVID.
Look, Louisiana, look. This is what I say on this. Louisiana's last on so many things. Let us be first on alcoholism, all right?
It's but yeah, I don't know. Is MLR going in the right direction? I don't know. I have no idea. I think there's some things to it. There's some things not to it.
I think there's enough there. I will always say the one thing that will bother me about MLR, and every time I look at MLR, the only thing I care about is what they do from a marketing standpoint. This is it. Because I think from an on-field standpoint, you obviously have to have a natural progression of development. But I think even more importantly, you have to give it a chance to be able to develop. And I think if they've been doing that, even if these signings might be sparse in usage, but it's still something. I give them credit. My issue is, I need to know who are the faces of the league. Just like if I look at the NFL, if I look at the NBA, I go, when I think NBA, who am I thinking of? LeBron, Giannis, Kawhi, whatever. If I think NFL, I go Drew, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. But when I go MLR, and regardless of whether I'm watching it or not, when I go MLR, I might have a regional because I know who to look for, but there's nobody that I go, there's this. Like, there's just, there's a big name, but I don't consider them as MLR. I consider them as a piece that's adding into lifting it. But I just want to know who's the face. Tyler Howden, sort of. Is it, what's that? Because I think that will change how people can attach. It makes it simpler for them.
I think it's going to be big. I think ESPN Plus has been a big thing. But, I think they're still kind of treating it like that NFL in the 60s and 70s where it's very regionalized. I think every team kind of has, they get on their local news broadcasts and they do stuff like that. And I think you're right. I think, Seattle doesn't necessarily have a face of their team, but they've kind of made their team kind of a part of the culture there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for them, I think that's why they're having, now they had a huge following anyway. But I think it's still kind of, what's Dallas going to do? Like, I have no idea what Dallas is going to do.
Right.
The Jackals with a terrible color scheme, by the way. But it's just it's just, God, anyway. I'm not even drinking, guys. It's the Jackals, and it's funny.
Like the colors make me drunk on its own.
Oh God, this makes me angry. But like the color,
brother. It could be guilty.
But like every team's kind of handling it differently. Like so, New Orleans is kind of they've grown the local game. They're still kind of playing the USA game too. Like they're like, okay, we will have a team of guys that maybe don't make our roster that will play in USA Rugby. So we're kind of giving back to USA Rugby that way. Houston said, we're going to try to make it as professional as possible. We're going to build a stadium. We're going to do that. Austin, what anybody want to take a shot at pronouncing that? The Gilgronis?
Gilgronis.
They better get some money. Gil, give me some money. But they did the same thing. They said, okay, we're going to try to make this as professional as possible. And they're pretty active. Houston and Austin have pretty much said, we're going to leave our bubble, just Houston and Austin. And then New Orleans has kind of said, I think New Orleans is interesting because they have a lot of free range. I think, they could really get out there. I think it's equally difficult for them. They've got to go out and find these kids. But right now it's kind of like, if you want to get in the MLR, send me your tape.
Right. Like, I think the thing that's going to be interesting with New Orleans, and I think is advantageous, it's the LSU effect. And what I mean by that is how LSU is able to be such a powerful school in football is because basically the state is able to lock itself up for the most part, and it doesn't have any natural rivals. So it's just, hey, look, keep these guys, and then we'll pull people in from outside. I think New Orleans Gold have that same effect, and I'll give credit to Ryan and Tim even contacting me about these things. But like, if they're able to develop the talent, because we already know the South is already overrun with athletic talent and there's intellectual talent as well, and you're kind of trying to traverse them into this rugby field. So now it's changing up the way that we're looking at rugby and how we're messaging it out so it can get into more open arenas, whether from the youth side and then obviously from the university side. Then all New Orleans has to do is just pick and choose from its own area, as opposed to have to go and recruit from over here and go recruit from over here. You're like, it's creating the feeder system. And so I think to some extent, while it goes back to that, it's that old archaic regionalized version, but for where it is right now, I think it can work. I think if you
that's kind of how Super Rugby started, though.
Right.
Like the Crusaders were just the regional team. And it was like you grew up in Christchurch, you played for them. Like that's who you played for. Like I think Bowden Barrett's brother You know, like he's playing for the Hurricanes right now, and his contract's about to come up. But the Hurricanes were like his system that he grew up in.
Right.
And then he played for the Crusaders for like a second, and he just had 2 like phenomenal years. So there's talk about will he go back there? But they had to get to that point where contracted players could move. And it was more, you know, they kind of took a soccer aspect of it where it's like, if I get a 16-year-old a shot, I'm getting him for cheap, but he's going to stay here. So it's kind of like, you know, I tell this kid, because I've always wanted this, because you do this, you do small college rugby and stuff. And so I think kind of outside the box on this stuff. Imagine if, because I think this MLR draft thing is not ready yet. I think it's a good idea. I think it's working, but it's just kind of a whatever.
It's still early.
Imagine this. Imagine if National Small School Rugby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if every MLR team could make an academy, and they just picked one of those small colleges to be their academy. And so the kids can get scholarships because it's being funded through MLR, you know,
Right.
or partial scholarships, whatever. And they play the fall NSRCO, whatever. They play NSCRO. They play the fall
But
season. of
NCR
that.
now. I need you to catch up with their rebranding.
Whoa. Sorry.
All right.
So they play in the National Small Schools League in the fall.
Right.
And then in the spring, they're just with whatever the development league is for MLR.
Right.
And so whether that's in New Orleans, it's a Division II men's team, but maybe it's, you know, hey, you just practice with the team. But, and, you know, then you get kids that now you're getting kids, you can tell a high school kid that you think's really good, hey, I want you to go to Loyola. And you're going to go to Loyola New Orleans, and that's our feeder team. You know, one of our players is the head coach. You know, one of our, you know, we'll handle, you know, here's how much we can offer you in scholarship.
Right.
You know, and then we'll take it from there. But you're going to sign this thing that says, you know,
You're
we
contracted
pretty much,
with us.
yeah, we own your rights, you know, for 2 years after you graduate from college.
Right. Basically working to the army methodology.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good idea as long as it's able to fulfill its dues in terms of payments. It does create a value system because look, essentially what all university football programs are academies for the pros is they don't have to pay for it. It's self-funded. So to be able to do and have that start off, it doesn't even have to say like you have to go to this school, but if you kick it off and show that there is a viable process to it, it can be moved to other schools. Like we're trying to do that with the HBCUs, and we're trying to do that with Southern University. And I'm gonna let you go in a second because I don't want you to be
I got time. You hush your mouth. But I meant to ask you this about this, because imagine this. I told you about some players that I coached in football that are big time players.
Right.
And just to go off on a tangent, how do you feel about that class of 2022 or whatever basketball player that said, I'm going to go to Howard?
I'm
told
happy
Duke,
for it.
forget you. North Carolina, forget you. I'm going to go to an HBCU. This is my shot to make a statement.
I am such an advocate for these kids to be able to go to this, and for whatever reason, but I like the fact that let's get to these HBCUs. Okay, so here's what I learned, and typically this is kind of black faux pas. I'm not supposed to open up the doorways, but it's all good. I'll step into the secret, you know, just for you, man, just for you. But no, I think the issue that will always come down to it is I am much more concerned about making sure that the HBCUs get the support, because when these kids start coming in, it's not the kids that are going to be the big changing piece, right? What happens is it's the alumni network that has to start getting invigorated from this. And that's what makes it such a big deal for these kids to be able to go to it. So I want them to come, like, to be honest with you, most of them, like the HBCU environment is probably as great. And it's not, and the funny thing is it's not just for black people. So it works for everybody, right?
I know. I've got 2 white friends that went to law school at Southern. I said,
Exactly.
Oh, really? Interesting. I was like, and what fraternity did you join? No, but I think, like, because I talked to that kid, I told him, I said, so when he was at one of his All-American camps, I was like, so imagine, Bill Simmons came up with this. It's like, imagine if you convinced the top, you know, 3 players in each position to just pick an HBCU and go.
Yeah.
Nike's coming. Like, Nike's going to follow.
That's
and
true.
they're going to write a big
That's
check.
what changes the game. That's all that you need, because what I think a lot of people don't even realize is how little the endowments for a lot of these. Outside of Howard, Morehouse, and North Carolina A&T. Howard, Morehouse, and Spelman. These are basically the three biggest HBCUs, and they get all the attention, almost all the attention. Consequently, there's 119 HBCUs that are out there, and almost out of that, 3 usually get it. So if it spreads to anything else, a North Carolina A&T, a Southern, Grambling, Alabama A&M, Texas Southern, Prairie View A&M, any one of these other ones, you start changing the perception of it. And now as they get more money, it does make everything more equivalent. And I think it makes things more even across the board. But it really is about drawing in that money.
So even though I went off on that tangent, and I just wanted to stir your pot a little bit. The reason I was saying is because in football, just like you were saying, football kind of takes care of itself. I don't know if most people should know this, but that there's, Bear Bryant used to make it a point that he played, like ULL or something, and he knew, or like Alabama State, and he knew that like the reason he played them. Now he used to go there. They don't do that anymore, but now they used to play them because they knew that if these teams are going to exist, like that game supports the entire athletic department, like that one game, so if I'm, teeny tiny school USA and I go play LSU they're going to give me $2 million, I'm going to go get stomped by 80 points. However, I'm going to make money so that the women's volleyball team exists, the men's volleyball team exists, So, and what I think is that in rugby, that doesn't exist. We don't have that. So that's why I think, and USA Soccer did the same thing, is they've, USA, because of COVID, USA Soccer has, gotten rid of the academy system that they had because it's just not financially stable. And they've turned it over to the MLS teams and said, look, you guys got to figure this out. Like you've got, you decide what you do. And I would be interested because I guarantee, let's say in the next 6 months, NOLA Gold's the only team that does this. And they say, hey, we're giving out $10,000 or $15,000 scholarships to Loyola New Orleans or Tulane. And you're going to play there, and the head coach is going to be this new, the guy that they just named the new like youth director or whatever. And if you did that, I guarantee you I have 22 seniors in my class here at Jesuit. I bet you could convince 10 of them to go. Easy. Yeah, without even thinking twice.
Without thinking about it, right.
Yeah. And even if you just said, like, you might get a scholarship, they'd be like, okay, I'll go anyway.
Right. No, and I agree with you on that one. I think, it's value proposition. It's one of the reasons why look, one thing, and I talked with this another person, her name's Farrah Douglas, and she's the head coach for Mount St. Mary's. And it wasn't until I talked to her that I considered it. But for me, one of the things that I was like, yo, is it possible that we can put these rugby teams, especially in these collegiate areas, without having to touch the NCAA? So essentially being able to have the rights and licensing to utilize the name and monetize the university name or be able to do that, but not have to be under the regulation of the NCAA, which means you have a further breadth. Because I think the thing that differs between now and whenever Bear Bryant, and I mean, honestly, we still do it to this day, the reason why all these small schools will come in and get walloped is because at the time it was a much harder system of being able to generate money. You're basically either in-crowd purchase, and then whatever is comes from government money for school funding. So, but now in this era, we have this digital, methodology. We have a digital method of being able to do it. So the fandom does not have to be limited to what's happening in the region, but it can be limited. And the sales subsequently can come from all these different places, from merchandise, even licensing. Now you can self-broadcast your stuff, and even if you need to put it onto another platform, YouTube is the equivalent of being on ESPN. It might not be in terms of prestige, but it is in terms of access to audience, because I consider ESPN now just it's a name. Not that it's a bad company, but it's a name. But if you have these university programs that are now actually altered to work to create value for the community, not simply just be a team to come into, but legitimately like, hey, connect us with the rest of the world, boom, 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 then now you can actually have these teams be able to be self-sufficient, can be a proper academy maybe for these MLR teams, because that's what I think the biggest advantage of MLR is you now have this credible revenue system. It's not much of one because they're still early, but it's there. There's something you can build on. But if you can do that and have these university teams take care of themselves, and it's only going to be a staunch few because not everybody's going to put in the time, but then you're going to see that development. And then now you start to see a much higher development of the talent, or a much greater transition in of that talent. So it's those high school kids. Now those kids are going into the high school and like, okay, now we have something that's for real that we can move alternatively to. And then on the other hand, it's now these universities can say, hey, university, we're self-sufficient. We're also going to be doing recruiting for you in essence. And so you can either support us or we're going to just continue to do what we do. One way or another, it works partnership-wise.
Yeah, and I don't think USA Rugby is going to mess, or I don't think NCAA is going to mess with us just because Title IX just kind of. I mean, I know for
not going to mess with us for now.
Because now that teams are, hell, Stanford had dropped 11 sports, but now we at OU, we were fighting for the women's team to get varsity, to get varsity status. Just so we would by proxy get status, get access to things, even though they were the varsity team. Right. Doing the different weight rooms and stuff like that. But as long as Title IX exists, we're the best sport because we can be split up even. Right. You could say men's team gets 5 scholarships, women's team gets 5 scholarships. Goodbye. And it's like and so I think what's great with some of these academy ideas is that some of these colleges, one, they need kids, and this would bring a ton of kids. I mean, even if you just said, hey, we just want you to be think of right now I tell my seniors, I was like, okay, you have to decide how far you want to go with rugby. And you can go to a traditional powerhouse where you can play in a D1A schedule. That's fine. Just realize who you're going to be competing with. If you want to go to an Arizona or St. Mary's or Cal or anything like that, that's fine. The other thing you have to think of is how can you get in the closest proximity to an MLR team? Yeah. Because they were going to have to see you. And that's your fastest way to get signed. And it's going to be a cheap contract. It's not going to make you millions of dollars, but you're going to get to see what professional rugby's like. And maybe then after that, it's still kind of, do you go overseas, do you not go overseas, or do you play, here in the U.S. or whatever? Right. And I think that's, it's the way it's kind of always been. And I think, it's better than what the prospects used to be. Good luck, fly yourself overseas, with a backpack and hope it works. Bring your boots, find a field, and Tuesdays and Thursdays they'll be there. That's totally, if all rugby people know, if you find a field with goalposts, go there on a Tuesday or Thursday. They will practice. They might practice other days, but they will always practice
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Always. But I think it's too much to consider some of these teams. Now, some of these teams, the heart of Louisiana Rugby's in New Orleans. Yeah. So all their meetings are there. So it's kind of like, okay, we can get somebody on that board really easily. Whereas, TRU here in Texas, we've got 4 cities that are pretty much hotbeds, really 3 major ones. And they're all 3 or 4 hours. Yeah. And they're all 3 or 4 hours away from each other, right. So, that's going to be tough, but everybody has this idea of we have to do this, we have to do that. It's we're going to grow the sport, grow rugby, just like Giff says. And we've got, we've got to find, message. And so lacrosse in Texas is huge right now. Okay. Yeah. So I've got kids, I'm coaching football right now, and I've got kids who, I'm like, hey, you should really try rugby. And they're like, I already play lacrosse. I've been playing lacrosse for 7 years. And just, I want you to wrap your head around this. If you want to hear about a subtle flex, here's a subtle, not even a flex. This is just my mind blown. Okay. We played football in the last 2 years. We get redistricted every 2 years. The last 2 years, we were in a district. It's the largest athletic district in the country. Right. Okay. We played high school football in a $68 million stadium, a $75 million stadium, good 3 times. We played in a $25 million stadium that was built in the 80s, and another team from that district just finished building a $55 million stadium. And so what lacrosse did is they said, we're going to hold our state championships at these giant stadiums. So even though it's going to be empty, we're going to play there because the kids will think it's really cool, and we'll do almost like a jamboree style. We'll go 6th grade through 12th grade. We're all going to play there. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with the private schools, at least right now in Texas, is, how can we either play with where the SaberCats play, or can we play in, Katie's got an $85 million stadium. Can we play there? Or, McKinney's got this one now. And so it's, everyone thought my stadium's awesome. I've got this little bitty stadium that the naming rights for my stadium were sold for $5,000 in like 1982. So it's, it's still an aluminum stadium, just like, but I shouldn't complain. In New Orleans, there are no stadiums. Like, everybody plays in one big stadium, and you could play, at 9 a.m. or 10 o'clock at night.
Play what? Oh my God! What is it
play
called?
it Sunday.
Airline field, or whatever the heck it's.
The Shrine on Airline. Get your stuff right. Jeez, Grow Rugby.
My bad.
Ass.
My bad.
It's only in your state. It's like, it's not like you have to go far.
Look. It'll always be. Oh man, that's that field that's on the left as I drive by. on I-10.
I entered on the South Airport, so I got to see. I got to see
it as it passed by. All right, cool.
It's gonna be it's gonna be interesting. I think you like your marketing, because you love. I just want everyone to know how much you love the New England Free Jacks.
Oh really?
Yeah, and they love.
This is what we doing. Don't talk about my Free Jacks.
You dirty rat. Baston for life, okay? Baston for life. Okay, go Sox, go Free Jacks. Tom Brady's
the god.
He's the god. He can impregnate me tomorrow. I don't care. All right, I got a question for you, Gift. Are you ready?
All right,
I'm going to ask you. This is how I end my podcast with my seniors. So I'm going to ask, what's your favorite food?
By hijacking other people's podcasts. I see what you do.
Yeah, I just hijacked it. I did it. What's your favorite food?
What's my favorite what?
Food.
My favorite food? Burgers, baby.
Gross. What's your least favorite food?
Probably mac and cheese.
What? Shut up. You're the worst. Favorite rugby player of all time?
Favorite rugby player of all time? Until I read his book, and I'm going to pretend like I didn't read it because it was so boring, Richie McCaw. But his book was just so boring.
He's like the greatest. You're the worst.
No, he's a good person. He's just not really interesting of a person in his book.
Too busy being the greatest of all time. He's too busy being that good. I don't know if did you watch the Michael Jordan documentary? He didn't think of a whole lot outside of basketball.
But look, he didn't think about a whole lot outside of basketball, but he had a personality. Now, mind you, I'm going to blame New Zealand.
Most people didn't like it.
But it was awesome. But you remember it. You're just like, look, I might hate you, but I feel. Richie is like, hey, you're great on the field, but you're kind of just like purposely boring. So
you're purposely boring. Yeah, that is. I'm trying to see when. Yeah, that is definitely. It was not that bad. It was not that. I love Eddie Jones's book was significantly better, which I was surprised by. But I'm
not surprised by it because of the fact that I feel like he's able to, because of how good of a coach he is, he has to have impeccable communication. Like, he has to be able to present the picture much better. Like, look, I don't blame Richie McCaw for being boring. I actually understand it because of the society that he's in. You cannot be exciting. It gets shamed. That being said, it doesn't mean that I have to not call out what. Even his movie, that Chasing Great, was.
I don't know if that was necessarily his fault. I mean, the Dan Carter one, it was on YouTube for like a day, and I found it and I watched it, and it wasn't. It really wasn't that great. I was like, God, how do you turn, a career like that into just this kind of like, he played rugby a little bit. He's all right.
New Zealand Film Board. This is what I just said. New Zealand Film Board.
It's unbelievable. So I'm going to give you the inside track. I just want you to know what we're working on right now so that everybody knows. We are working on, because we're not sure what USA Rugby is going to do with all this COVID stuff. We are working currently on a Texas, Louisiana, kind of high school rugby tournament style kind of season.
I've been hearing some things. Some
Yes.
little birdies have been telling me some things about this.
Yes, that we're looking at, like mostly the private schools all playing together and playing against each other. And just kind of, I think the 3 teams in Houston, us, and then the 2 or 3 teams in Louisiana.
So basically New Orleans versus everybody else?
Well, in Dallas. I'm the only team in Dallas. I'm the only private school in Dallas.
So New Orleans versus everybody else?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. See how that works. We've had some good ones. We've had some – I mean, there have been some legit – it's been interesting. I can't catch a break anywhere because you said, like, you know, what was some of the big things kind of after all those years, like with NACRA and with New Orleans and then Dallas. And the one thing it did is it cut my rugby career probably, I think, as short as possible.
Yeah.
I might still be playing, you know, but I mean, we played – I think I didn't make – after the 2008 season, we didn't make the South playoffs, or we didn't go past the South playoffs. That was the last time I didn't play rugby in May or June for the next, like, decade.
Right.
And so it was
down. You pretty much played like 12, 13 years of rugby within a really, honestly, 7 to 8 year period, and even though pushed even more a decade. So.
Oh, and it was brutal. I mean, like, I think that year when we traveled that far, we did Atlanta 3 or 4 times. We played Tampa Crew, I think, somewhere in Florida. And the South Championships were, like, I think, somewhere in Florida that year. And then our round of the Sweet 16 was in Virginia. And then we went to Colorado for the Final Four. And, I mean, it was – and then, like, one year at the Reds, I wasn't on the east side of the bracket anymore. I was on the west side. So we went to – I think San Francisco was one of our rounds. And so, you know, it was like – so we went to – we got lucky. We got a round in Texas. So we went to, like, Austin. Then we went to San Francisco. And then Glendale.
Yeah, I can understand that. All right, let's close up this podcast because we got to just moving around.
I want a part 2. That's why I got a meeting, but I want a part 2.
Oh, we'll get a
I want
part
to
2.
be asked back. So everyone hit that like and subscribe right now so that you make gifts bring me back, and we can get into some deep stuff. Yeah, subscribe to the podcast, download.
All you got to do is just give it to all your students and be like, you are mandatory to have to listen to this all the way through, and just push the numbers all the way up, and then we're good. We good.
Yeah, just hit play. You can put your phone somewhere else. I don't care if you actually listen to it. Just get that play count up, you know. And then I'm going to start putting my little anchor things on there, and you know, I get 15 cents for every 1,000 listens, and you know, that's how we monetize this stuff.
Hey, I'm here for this. And then I just want to be on the Jesuit Rugby podcast, even though I have nothing to do with Jesuit.
Next rugby, I have to think about what's my next thing. I don't know. The rugby podcast was just because of COVID, so we weren't able to have our banquet or finish our season. So it was just for COVID. Because what I always wanted to do, and I told you about this, I'd always wanted to do kind of a high school rugby / you know, college rugby podcast to where, you know, I think it's an untapped market, especially with the MLR draft stuff. Because you do have guys coming from not necessarily programs that you've never heard of, but coming from non-traditional programs.
Yes.
Where you can, you know, and now it's like, okay, we can see. And I really think that college rugby has gotten significantly more regionalized, which will make it easier to cover. Like there's the, you know, like I think at OU, you know, we played everywhere. You know,
Texas,
and I think it's just
Texas is where OU is playing in now.
Yeah, now everybody's in, you know, Red River Conference. You know, one time LSU was in like the SEC, like they just kind of followed around and played this, you know, the same schedule that the football team played and stuff like that. So, you know, now it's significantly more regionalized and just getting to those areas. Cause I think we have 4 MLR teams within a circle. Yeah. Within 2 states and a college rugby conference that exists in those states. Yeah. And only in those states. So now it's like, okay, how does this not, you know, like a hotbed of just kind of activity, you know, and how do we kind of grow that? And same thing with high school rugby. I think high school rugby is huge.
No, I'll give it this. I didn't realize how impactful high school rugby had gotten until maybe last year, because I'd purposely kind of been ignoring it because I was just like, I don't see there's enough here. But no, it's hot now. It's hot.
Oh God. Oh yeah, this is. I tell my kids, this is until you go to the pros. This will be the most professional team you play for. We've got. We take our charter buses, and I've got curfews and stuff.
Until you get them working with Billy Nicholas and Josh Macy and Lindenwood or Colton Carriega over at Life.
Yeah, exactly. Until that happens.
And
most of my kids don't. That's the difference. See, the difference between this group, and this is what I think is the biggest difference. The difference between this group and like our age group. When we played rugby, late 90s, 2000s, we would go anywhere to play.
Right.
And we would essentially put our life on hold. These guys, college has been beat into their head for so long that they will play rugby as long as it fits in their life goal.
Plan, yeah.
So it's like, I think A&M is going to start getting bigger and bigger because guys want to be engineers. And so it's like, as long as I can get into A&M, I'll play rugby. Like I've sent, 4 or 5 guys this year to A&M.
Nice.
But so it's a little bit different than like, like I only get 1 or 2 guys that are like, I'll go anywhere. Like, I don't care. I just want to play. It's like, okay, well, let's find the best school you can play at, or let's find the best place you can play at. Because now it's kind of like, I'd almost taken a gap. One of my assistant coaches did take a gap year, and he went and played in New Zealand and then came back and played.
That's
so
true.
it's a different aspect, and it's a different kind of mentality of it. But it'll work. That's why I think kind of MLR can work, is because, can you pay a kid enough to where he doesn't have to worry about his jobs? If you can do that. Yeah. If you can do that, and it doesn't, not a lot, it's not a lot. It's just enough. Can I live comfortably? If you pay for my travel, it definitely didn't have to be a lot of money.
Right.
And then, maybe you have a connection. So maybe if I'm, an engineer, or a lawyer or something, different teams offer me different things. So, me getting to New Orleans, be like, okay, well, if I'm a petroleum engineer, that sounds phenomenal. Like I can, I'll meet people that know people.
Yeah, that's true. Hold on, I'm turning off the podcast. Like, I just want to turn the podcast.
All right,
I like the conversation. They don't need to hear anymore. We're good.
All right.
Thank you for coming through, bro. Thank you for coming through.
See you on the next episode with Matt Upton here on Grow Rugby.
Yo, I hope you guys had so much fun with that. I really did too, man. Like this was really fun. Dude, thank you, Matt, for taking the time, just dropping the stories, man. It was good to be able to resonate in that level. And guys, everybody, thank you for listening. Yo, please check out some of our other podcasts. Last week we had Freddie Henry Ajuda for coming out of Life University in Nigeria. We had Derek Lipscomb out of Old Blues Rugby and Roots Rugby. Pat Evans from the publication Front Office Sports. We had Kelly Smith of American Rugby Pro Training Center. We had Adam Gray Hayward, star of the movie Play On. We had Jackie Finland from the Rugby Breakdown, Farrah Douglas, Rashad Lipford of North Carolina A&T, James Brunson of the Nomads, Philadelphia Nomads, Matt Provost from Prairie View A&M, Nicholas Walcott from Chicago Griffins. We had Chetta Emba, Nia Tapper, Blaine Scully, just a load of people that you want to be able to go back and listen to. Charity Williams, guys, we got some great. Like, it's getting so much that even I'm starting to forget names. Not because they were bad, is because there's so many to choose from. There's so many stories. Phil Field, just so much depth and intricacy inside everybody's thoughts, and it is a true pleasure to be able to listen to them and their things. So guys, check it out. Go hear out what they have to say. Tell your friends about it. Give us a shout out. And I really do appreciate you guys for taking the time to be with us and listen each week. And in the meantime, look, you guys, please stay safe. I hope you stay happy. I hope you guys are healthy. And I hope you guys know that you are highly favored. I will talk to you next time. Cheers.